Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. This is Elcia Vasquez. I'm the Executive Director of Palante Harlem, and I wanted to first and foremost thank everyone that's making time to join this call, this webinar. Things change every day for us as an organization. The need for our services increases day by day, but we're trying as much as possible to be able to bring to you guys the top of the top individuals that can really help you as renters in New York City living through this pandemic. I do not know if you guys are aware of it, but there's been another moratorium for the housing court evictions, and that moratorium extends all the way to October 1st. That does not mean that the courts are closed. What that means is that the courts are open, and the 14,500 families that were supposed to have been evicted before the pandemic, they're now at risk of being evicted. Now, if you were affected by COVID, meaning if you did lose your job, if you became ill, then and you can't pay the rent, then you're able to wait until October 1st and be able to get an attorney in housing court when the landlord takes you to housing court in the event that you have been able to unpay your rent. However, that is for people that have not paid their rent, meaning that there's a rent arrears. That is not for people who are trying to assert the right to succession. And what that means is that these are people that the leaseholder, the person whose lease was under their name, either left the apartment or succumbed to the virus, and the landlords are targeting these individuals to evict them. The landlords right now can begin the paperwork, but again, for those folks, we have to look at October 1st. We're here, we consider ourselves blessed in the fact that we are able to have strategic partners. Today, because of the need, we brought in the New York City HRA, Human Resources Administration, and Department of Social Services. And these guys are terrific. I applaud them for agreeing to help us out. I know that you guys know that, but 2 weeks ago, we were supposed to have a similar seminar, and we wanted to make sure that we did it right the first time. So with us today are some great people that they're going to talk to us about what benefits are available, including benefits available to the immigrant community. And I know a lot of us have papers, a lot of us do not have papers, but that does not mean that we don't have rights to be, to get help so that we can protect our homes. That being said, and without further ado, I'm going to pass on this webinar to Mr. Ramon Flores. Ramon Flores was highly recommended to us. We recruited him through Mr. McKinday, and as you might recall, a few weeks ago, Mr. McKinday was on a call with us. And Mr. Flores, we were trying to recruit him the last minute, and he was trying to do 2 webinars at the same time. It didn't quite work out because there's only one Mr. Flores. So he agreed to do this today with us, and he brought in a team of subject matter experts. They're going to focus not just on how to get help with rent arrears, but really what are our rights as immigrants. And when I say immigrants, I mean with and without papers, documented or undocumented. So I'm going to patch it on to him. Mr. Flores is actually the Assistant Deputy Commissioner at the city agency that's called Human Resources Administration. So Mr. Flores, without further ado, take it on. I mean, we were anxious to hear from you and the rest of your team. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very, very much for having me. I want to thank Palante and Ms. and Elcia for inviting me and for the kind words. And I hope I can live up to it. And if there's things I cannot answer, I will do my best to provide responses or get information back. I did want to just mention that some of the panelists here, while if for whatever reason there's a specific question that they can't answer directly right now, we will work to get answers back to the team. So I guess I'll start with myself. I am responsible for the cash assistance centers throughout the city of New York. We have about 21 citywide. After COVID-19, we consolidated them for various reasons, including the safety of staff and individuals having to go all over the city to try to to apply for benefits. I've been doing this since 2016, so in operations world, that is an eternity, it feels like, because operations is something that is, and Elsia mentioned earlier, it's ever changing. There's always a crisis, there's always a fire, and our job is to try to meet the needs of the individuals that are facing that crisis or that fire. Unfortunately, public benefits, public assistance, cash assistance is heavily regulated with a lot of statutory and state regulatory requirements or rules. However, especially during the COVID epidemic, we have worked very hard with our Office of Policy, our Office of Procedure, to secure different waivers or different easements, let's say, to provide additional access or to avoid termination of benefits. That is one of the things that we really pushed for. So a little bit about the work that my offices particular do in administering cash assistance. We administer both ongoing public assistance, so you get monthly cash assistance, monthly shelter. As part of that, you may be eligible for SNAP benefits as well as Medicaid benefits. In addition to that, especially which is probably the most relevant for this forum, we do a lot of one-time assistance. So individuals who have income do not have active public assistance or cash assistance cases can apply through our program area and get one-time grants for a variety of matters. So, for example, I'm thinking within this forum, some of the issues that might be affecting you all or individuals that you know are things such as Elsia mentioned rent arrears. We do utility arrears. We do grants for moving from one location to another. So if for whatever reason the court case that you might be dealing with cannot be resolved and you secure housing in other areas, we do provide grants for moving related expenses. We provide grants to pay storage arrears, so your belongings don't get auctioned, and of various other benefits that we administer through our program area. Of course, the way to apply has changed drastically since March. I would say March 23rd, because we secured a waiver to no longer have to have face-to-face client interviews, which was huge because individuals can now apply online through a website and a mobile app called Access HRA, which I will get to a little further in the future. But also, we don't have to have a face-to-face interview, which is really good because that, just with the fear of COVID and potentially getting it, especially back March, April, May, June, even now when we see spikes here and there, people needed ability to access these benefits, but didn't want to come to our centers, which is completely understandable. So right now, the process is basically you apply online, or you can, of course, if you can't apply online for whatever reason, you can mail an application or or you can still come in because we do have 7 open locations that you could still walk into, which I can give more details about as well. Which, depending on the way the questions come back, we can get into more detail on that. But really the goal is to get individuals access to these public assistance benefits and services without really leaving their home, all through internet or and then a phone call subsequent that we reach out to the public, to the applicant. It's the same process for our one-time assistance, or what we commonly those are commonly known as, one-shot deals. You'll hear that term a lot. It's really an emergency assistance grant, but the common parlance is a one-shot deal. So if you hear that, that is what either I or some of our colleagues are talking about. But due to the nature of this forum and some of the questions that Elsia had posed, what I did was I reached out to the arm of our agency that deals with the public engagement, our external affairs partners, and specific to the areas of community engagement, and then the Office of Refugee and Immigrant Affairs, which might be able to speak to some of the issues that were raised in my initial discussions with Elsia about, impact on potential impact on immigration status, some immigrant eligibility rules. New York happens to be one of the more liberal, obviously, but one of the most, I would say, my favorite part of it. And I've been dealing with immigration and public assistance issues almost since I began my career with the Human Resources Administration. So without going too deep into it, that's just a basic overview of my responsibilities and my role in within HRA. And that being said, I will just start turning over to our other panelists so they can introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about the work that their office does or the work that they do, and then we can move on to maybe taking some questions or hearing from the audience about some of the stuff that some of the issues that you have. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask Elsia, is there anything that you wanted me to add, or did you want to add anything before we move on to another piece?
Yeah, no, I think this is terrific. I think, the more in depth that we can go, the more rudimentary that we can go, the better for our audience so that we get a better feel about what our rights are.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll introduce everybody else and they can tell you a little bit about what they do. And then when they're done, we can get into some more of the nuance or a little more in the weeds about, and I'll start maybe with just the particulars about the cash assistance eligibility process, and then we can move on from there. So that being said, without further ado, I'll introduce my first colleague, who is from the Office of External Affairs, Vanessa Fuentes, who is the Special Advisor to the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Advocacy and Outreach. Vanessa, welcome and thank you for joining us. I haven't seen you in a long time, so it's good to see you. And you can take it away from, take it from there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Fuentes, and I work in the Office of Advocacy and Outreach, which is part of the larger external affairs portfolio at the Human Resources Administration. In my capacity as a special advisor to our Deputy Commissioner, I help her coordinate and oversee some of the various units within our office, which include the Office of Refugee and Immigrant Affairs, and we have two of my colleagues here. I also provide a lot of support to everyone under our DC's, our Deputy Commissioner's portfolio. Because I have been doing this work, I think a little bit longer than anyone else on this panel, I understand programs, HRA programs, Human Resources Administration programs a little bit better, as well as DHS programs and services. And that's because I've spent some time working with the Department of Homeland Services as well. So that's a little bit of what I do here in the office. Julio?
Thank you, Vanessa. Elsia, Ms. Vasquez, thank you for inviting us, and thank you for Palante Harlem for inviting us this afternoon. My name is Julio Martinez. I work for the Department of Social Services Office of Advocacy and Outreach. In my role, we mainly promote and provide webinars, seminars on Access HRA. We mainly provide these trainings to community-based organizations that work directly with clients. In our webinars, we go into all of the aspects and all of the features that you can find within Access HRA, which there are three main components: Access HRA client's website, where clients can access and connect to their benefits and manage their benefits through Access HRA, through the Access HRA client's website. There's another component, Access HRA mobile app, which complements the Access HRA client's website. And here, clients can submit corresponding documents on their HRA benefits. And lastly, we have the Access HRA, the provider portal, which is intended for the use of community-based organizations. But yes, we mainly focus on teaching community-based organizations, providers on how to use Access HRA in general and how their clients can use Access HRA in general. And also we follow up with them in terms of if there's any glitches, any error messages, within the system. We make sure that Access HRA is both functional for the clients and the providers. And I don't know who is next.
I can help you out, not a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
So next up is our team from the from Office of Advocacy and Access. First up is the Executive Director, Camilla Mitchell, for the Office of Advocacy and Access. And she could tell you what her part of her role is and take it from there.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here. It's great to be here. And it's great to see some of my colleagues that I haven't seen in a really long time. Good to see you, Ramon. I know everybody has given a very good overview of kind of what we all do. Like Vanessa mentioned, Vanessa and Julio and myself and Shoshana are very much kind of in the same shop. We're in the External Affairs team, which has a bunch of different teams within it. The Advocacy and Access team deals with a lot of the vulnerable populations that we see here at DSS, meaning both HRA and DHS. So we oversee the work of a director of LGBTQI affairs, disability affairs, immigrant affairs, and a language access director. So we're here, it seems, particularly because of our immigration expertise, but just to deal with any of those issues that may have come up. It's great to be here, and I will turn it over to Shoshana.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. And unlike Camilla, to see some of my colleagues for the first time. I joined HRA just a few months ago, and I am very pleased to see some of you all for the first time and to be with you all this evening. So as Camilla had mentioned, I am the Director of Immigrant Eligibility and Access within the Office of Refugee and Immigrant Affairs. And within the Office of Refugee and Immigrant Affairs, we have sort of part of the work focused on immigrant eligibility and the other part focused on language access, ensuring appropriate access for the immigrant and limited English populations of New York City. And what we do generally is act as an additional resource with expertise on immigrant eligibility for benefits programs, and more recently under the COVID-19 emergency, with changes in procedures and some policies, we've acted as an additional resource for those processing applications to double check whether an applicant is in fact eligible for certain benefits. And so we have been providing those additional opinions and resources and access for those who are processing applications. And I'm happy to answer questions about any of that this evening.
Thank you. So Elsia, I'm thinking if it's all right, we can start. I can just start a little bit about talking a little bit about the process as designed right now, so that people can access the benefits and services we have. I just happened to be looking at some of the Q&A that was coming across on the side.
Yeah.
When we get to that part, we can discuss, because I do it, you know, as we're talking and as I'm hearing some or seeing some of the questions, there are other parts of whether it's DSS, HRA, or other areas that might have more or might specialize in those issues as well. So something we could do is gather that information and provide the appropriate contacts for those areas or for those issues. But as it relates specifically to cash assistance and public assistance in general, I mentioned earlier that there were various waivers for CA eligibility. That continues currently as far as waivers related to various eligibility requirements, which in the past, if you didn't meet those requirements, you would get rejected. Right now, basically, all those mandatory type of appointments related to employment, engagement, assessments, substance use, those basically will not result in an adverse determination of your cash assistance case. The main reasons people would be rejected for a cash assistance case, which is important information to know, is we are unable to reach you, and so we cannot conduct an an eligibility interview. While the face-to-face requirement of the interview was waived, we still have to conduct the eligibility interview. So that is the one thing that I'd like to champion and say to everybody, because we do find issues where individuals do not give us either most up-to-date phone number or the best phone number to reach them, which results in a little bit of back and forth, because after a certain number of attempts, their case could be rejected for not completing the interview. And we like to avoid that as much as possible. So one of the things I like to talk to when I talk to partners in the community, clients directly, or whoever it is, whatever audience that I'm working with, is to emphasize the import of having a phone number that is up to date when provided when an application is submitted, whether that be through the Access HRA vehicle or through a paper vehicle, as well as the second and a very important piece is when the phone call comes in, we get a lot of feedback that, you know, it doesn't, right? A lot of our staff are working from home. They're calling from either block numbers or numbers that might look like spam, or numbers that, so people don't always answer the phone because they don't, you know, if my phone filter says spam, I never answer, right? So that is a reality that some of the feedback we're hearing from the community does happen. So it's something that I just wanted to alert you as like a very first step to avoid that potential barrier or reason for a case being rejected, is the inability to complete that interview. So one of the things I definitely, as I mentioned, is encouraged to have up-to-date contact phone information. And then I know it's a pain, but answer even if you do see unknown caller or spam or something of the like, because there's no way for us to really say this is the city of New York calling, which then everybody seems to be, you know, would probably answer. The other thing that I like to emphasize, right, because my goal, or what I want, is I want all eligible individuals to be determined eligible the first time they apply, right? Because if that doesn't happen, then, you know, people got to come back and forth. You get more application volume that you don't necessarily need. So we want to take advantage of this time where those other eligibility requirements are relaxed, to try to get as many people who are eligible on. And so moving on to that, is the next part is the document part. Due to COVID, we understand that certain documentation is not always available. So we did revise our document guide. And I think one of the things I tried to give to, or we tried, I know in my work is past dealings with Camilla and company, we tried to provide to people guides to the eligibility documentation, so that can make it easier for them to kind of know from the beginning what they need to provide initially. So we do have an updated COVID version of that guide that is a little more, I don't want to say relaxed, but it does allow for attestations, or, you know, basically written documents from an individual attesting to their income, attesting to some of our other eligibility requirements, which I think is a plus, and we could send that to the organization, and you could disseminate that to your constituents, so that we can ensure that
Interrupt you for a second, just for
Sure.
our audience. You know, we have a lot of lingos in our world, right? We know what SNAP is, we know what cash assistance is, but could you help us break it down? Like when someone is going to go and apply,
Mm-hmm.
the SNAP is food stamps. We got that part, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you say cash assistance, what does that entail? Because I know that there's different areas, right, within that. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, and that is a good question. Cash assistance is basically the full gamut, and it's ongoing cash assistance. That is the monthly cash benefit along with a monthly rent benefit, and then there's some other minor benefits that come along with that. But when we talk about cash assistance, ongoing cash assistance, we're talking about the full I don't want to call it suite of benefits, but the full array of benefits that you may be eligible for. It could include a restaurant allowance if you don't have a cooking facility. So it could change the some of the other types of benefits available through an ongoing cash assistance case, but the main area would be cash, shelter with rent, and then the SNAP that may come with it, and Medicaid is comes part and parcel with the cash assistance case. Julio or Vanessa, do you have anything that you want to add about that particular question that you've come across, or that you communicate out to our constituents and our partners?
Yeah. So, sorry,
Go
I would
ahead,
just say
Vanessa.
two very brief comments. So one of them is that sometimes we use cash assistance and public assistance interchangeably. So, a lot of people in the community may say, I'm going to go to the HRA office, the Human Resources Administration, to apply for public assistance. Again, sometimes that's used interchangeably with cash assistance. It's pretty much the same thing, right? It's just like semantics, but it's basically the same thing. And like Ramon said, when clients apply for cash assistance, it can be ongoing, or it could be an immediate grant that is given at one point, right? Like if I need, if I don't have toiletries, if I have a job interview and I need a cash grant to be able to buy things that I may need for that interview, HRA can give you a small cash grant to be able to help you buy those toiletries. So I just wanted to make that sort of like comment that cash assistance and public assistance may be used at different times, but it's the same thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to go back to is the thing that Ramon said about the importance of making sure that when our clients and your clients, Elsia, and apply for public benefits, that they include always the best number where they can be reached at. And if they don't have one, because sometimes that is the case, maybe they can provide the phone number of somebody that will know how to reach them, or at the very least to maybe include an email address, because even though we are not allowed, or like it's not permissible for us as an agency to communicate with clients by email, we can still, like I have done it in some cases, under extenuating circumstances. I have reached out to clients to say, I'm reviewing your application. We don't have a phone number, or the phone number we have on file isn't working. And I have sent them an email to just verify that information. So again, at the very least, include a number where somebody can reach you if you don't have a working phone number, or an email address. Because like Ramon said, if we're unable to reach the person, we will not be able to conduct that interview, and the case will likely be rejected because we couldn't reach anyone. And then the final point that I will make is that because we're all working from home these days, as Ramon said, the numbers from us will come maybe blocked, or maybe clients don't recognize them. What I have done in the past, I always make sure that when I'm talking to a client, because clients are skeptical, they don't want to give out their information, their date of birth, their social security number, their case number. If they know it, sometimes they don't even know their case number, which is understandable because sometimes case numbers change frequently. But what I do to make sure that the people that I'm talking to trust me, I make sure that obviously I identify myself, and I give them information that only a city agency like my agency would have. So for example, before I call a client, I would have their case in front of me, and I would say, are you still at this location? Is the, I see that you apply with your daughter or with your son, and I see that this is your date of birth. So in some cases, I'm just confirming that information to sort of like be able to gain their trust, and then they can share more information with me. So that is just something that if they're skeptical about providing information to the person on the other side, maybe they could also ask questions like, okay, I know that you're calling from HRA, but tell me more, right? So maybe they could ask those questions to see if the person is a real agency person, as opposed to somebody who's just trying to scam them.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but it's so true. Yeah, I'm sure. I think Julio was going to add something to that. Julio, do you have something to add to what Vanessa said?
No, in regards to the difference between SNAP food stamps and cash assistance, I think Vanessa did a good job explaining
Of course.
the difference. Another thing that I want to add, usually when I started learning about the difference between, because it was confusing for me when I started doing this job. So cash assistance, CA, is basically, we used to call it, when I first started working here, or like social work, we used to call it a public assistance case, which entails a person having active food stamps, shelter allowance, which Mr. Flores brought up, and also Medicaid. So 3 components in order to have a cash assistance case, which are, like I mentioned, food stamps, shelter allowance, and Medicaid. A SNAP/food stamp, the person just receives, usually received that benefit. But I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. So just so I can just circle back. So we're looking at, when we say cash assistance, we're looking at the public, their benefits for families to help them pay their rent, right? It's not a lot of money usually, right? But it's some money, right? Then they're spending money. I'm just bringing it down to the level to make sure. So there's like spending money. Then there's money that they will give the landlord towards the rent. But then where do the one-shot deals fall in all of this?
Okay, and that's a great question. So the one-shot deals are basically one-time assistance requests, applications. You use the same cash assistance application, so and you can apply through Access HRA as well. And you just indicate that instead of a recurring or ongoing cash assistance case, you're looking for a emergency assistance one-shot deal. On Access HRA. Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention about Access HRA, which is great, which I should have mentioned initially, was it comes in multiple languages. So it's English, Spanish, Bengali, and I don't know off the top of my head all the local law languages, but there's a plethora of languages it comes in. So individuals who have, English is not their first language, they still would have the ability to utilize XHRA and apply for benefits. So that is something that I omitted or neglected to mention. If any one of my colleagues know all the languages that XHRA is on, feel free to jump in. Anyway, at any rate, when we talk about one-time assistance, it's the same cash assistance application. I still do the cash assistance. I still do an interview, except the interview is limited to, or the benefits are going to be limited to whatever that emergency that you're presenting is. It may be utilities, it may be rent arrears, it may be need for storage arrears. It could be all 3 of them, right? It's not limited. You would, during the course of the interview, we're going to elicit what it is that you mentioned you need. Now there might be some emergencies that aren't covered by HRA, which we would indicate as well, and those eligibility requirements vary a little bit. So, for example, on a one-time assistance, all those future appointments for engagement or work or those would have never played a part in it anyway, right? Because you're just asking for one-time assistance to meet this particular emergency need. They all have their own specific regulatory requirements. So, for example, if you apply for storage, we do pay for storage arrears. There are some limitations, like you can't be living in permanent housing and get storage arrears from us, for example, which makes some sense. You can't have like 50 units. There are some limitations, but the overall goal there is to ensure that your belongings, due to a housing issue like eviction, you got put out, your health and safety. So individuals fleeing a domestic violence situation whose stuff ends up in storage for one reason or another, they have a recourse to ensure that their belongings don't get auctioned off. So one-time assistance, we have, and there's one-time assistance have specific programs. So anyone, let's say you have in receipt of SSI, not retirement, not SSA, which is the Social Security Administration's retirement income. I'm talking about the SSI that's for disabled individuals who basically never worked, and there's that one-time assistance is available. Those eligibility requirements are a little less, I would say, I don't want to say less stringent, but the income requirements don't apply as much because we already know you're on a fixed income. You're in receipt of SSI. You're going to be eligible, provided you can just prove that you have the emergency that you're claiming you need the assistance for. Versus other types of one-time assistance where it's just that you may have lost some income. So you might have had some sort of catastrophe, a flood in your house that resulted in your loss of furniture, a fire, so that we would replace that. But because you have some income, we do have income requirements, which off the top of my head I don't remember, but it's something around like 125%, 100 or 185% of the poverty line. So that's the major difference of the two types of programs that give cash assistance one-time grants. But either way, all of that comes through the same entry point. It would come in through the same cash assistance application. It would go through the same eligibility interview. It would get you would present whatever documents to support that emergency, and then on the back end, your situation will determine basically where the money comes from, for lack of a better word. But that is, in a nutshell, the one-time assistance is that it's basically the same. All you would indicate is that you're only applying for this and not ongoing assistance. And the one thing, and I think the area that I want to jump into specific to emergency arrears grants is rent arrears, because I'm thinking a lot of the individuals on this who are participating, based on the discussion and of course the title of your organization, are interested in. So rent arrears, it's the same thing. It comes into us. We do the eligibility interview. Based on the amount, the number, or how much you owe in arrears, it goes to a separate unit. So we basically collect all the information, do the interview, and it goes to Ranty's unit, McKinley's unit, to do the assessment based on the information in the interview, and they're the ones that end up making the ultimate eligibility determination. However, as I said, I guess the most important piece is, when you have that interview, especially for rent arrears, if you have a subsequent interview and the documents needed for those grants, it's a variety of them. We also have a guide just specific to rent. So I mentioned earlier, we have guides for specific to overall eligibility. We have a document guide specific to rent, so that your constituents know what type of documents they could utilize to demonstrate that to verify their eligibility for the grant. So for example, one of the things we have to confirm is that you have the right to stay in the apartment, let's say. That's a big one. So everyone, when you talk commonly, everyone just says a lease, everyone just talks about a lease. But there are other ways that we accept that documentation. It could be, let's say you're renting a room from somebody and they're the primary tenant. It could be we have a form for primary tenant and secondary tenant relationships. We have a form for people that are renting rooms. We have so there are multiple ways to prove the same requirement, that the right to stay in the apartment, for example. I'm trying to think off the top of my head some of the other things that we utilize. Oh, another one is, one of the main things that, and I'm sure Ranty mentioned it as he's the expert in this, is a future ability to pay your rent. So you come in and you owe, let's throw out a number, $6,000. Your monthly rent is $500, or your room is $500, and you make $400. So initially, we're likely gonna say you need to show that you can pay the rent going forward if I pay this rent going back, because we don't necessarily pay rent only for you to be in arrears again in a couple of months, right? So we ask for proof of ability to pay rent going forward. You can have a family member that contributes. You can provide a document or even a written statement saying, Ramon Flores, I contribute $200 a month to Elcia's rent, and I make, you know, whatever, $800 a week or whatever, so that we know that this person who's contributing is a reliable contributor, and we would be able to establish the ability to pay future rent. So you know, again, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds about, you know, each eligibility requirement, but I did want to mention that we do have guides that will definitely show the different ways to meet each eligibility requirement for the specific type of grant, in this case, the rent arrears.
Yeah, and you'll be able to supply us a copy of that guide so that we could distribute
Yes,
it to everyone on the call. So my question,
I'll
yeah, excellent, thank you. So my question is that when McKinsey was on the webinar with us, the futurability is obviously a very big issue now with COVID, right? Because we're still trying to get, you know, reinstated in our jobs and things like that. And I know that there's some wiggle room if it's because of COVID, right? Has it been implemented yet, the wiggle room? Because if people right now cannot pay the rent and they fell behind, and there's families that are at risk of becoming homeless, if they don't have a job right now, and they apply, they're not trying to get public assistance, they're not trying to get the SNAP, they're not trying to get the cash assistance, they're trying to get part of the cash assistance, which is the one-shot deals to get them through. Is there something within HRA right now there's some sort of, not a waiver, but instead of like looking at each case individually, because Mr. McKinney led us to believe that I think each case is different. Am I right or not really?
you know, because my area doesn't necessarily assess the eligibility for the arrears grants, I couldn't say for sure, but and I don't want to mislead anyone. I've heard similar questions or similar statements in other contexts about relaxing or making that one a little easier to meet. Like, even though you don't have the income now, you know you're going to go back to work, let's say in 3 months, would they be a little more lenient with it? I've heard that talk, but because I'm not responsible for that area that assesses it, I can't say for sure, but that's something that we can get back to you about. In addition, I believe, and you know, it might be too late for this, but I know that one of the things that not HRA, but the state of New York recently did was a housing related rent relief program that but I think it might be over, or it was recently just extended again.
It's over. It was over last week, I believe. And that was a little bit different because, you know, what we have in terms of the audience, we have folks that did not receive any services. They were below the poverty line, you know, but they were paying the rent. And now, because of the job interruption, they're faced with owing rent from March till now. What we're trying to do here with our clients is that we know a lot of our folks, especially our undocumented folks, they're so terrified of the landlord confronting them face to face, because as the landlords that we fight, you remember the name Palante is an acronym. It's People Against Landlord Abuse and Tenant Exploitation. So we characters in the community, and these characters like to knock on doors, demand money, all these things. So a lot of our clients have gone to borrow cash money from, you know, family, friends, loan sharks, you name it. They borrowed money. But they can't go back now and borrow more money from these guys because it's just not feasible, right? While their bosses still tell them, look, we're not open yet, you know, and they're probably going back to work with some number of hours, not the full schedule. So my question is that these folks are, and this is, you know, you're not gonna, the reason why we have you guys on this panel is because we really need to have this conversation. In the sense that we have dad that works, mom is at home taking care of the kids, and now dad, the only source of income, lost his job, and then the other family members who also live in the apartment that are helping pay with the rent, that father, that head of household also lost the income. So they just need a relief for a certain amount of months. You know, they're not trying to, you know, rip all the benefits. But then there's the caveat. And then I think this is where, you know, the rest of your team can speak on, is that a lot of our folks are in the process of putting together their papers, the paperwork to become permanent residents here. And they have been led to believe that if they do, it would actually work against them if they applied for a one-shot deal, which is a loan. Can you guys comment on, any of you guys are able to comment on that? Would it affect them?
So I'll start and then I'll defer to my colleagues because that is a question that has come up. And the one thing I would say about the harassment from the landlords, and again, this is something that just occurred to me now while we're speaking, is if I'm not mistaken, HRA and through a different arm of the agency has been working to stand up a tenant support team, and I think it's on the legal side, if I'm not mistaken, so that and I don't know off the top of my head, I don't know the requirements or the full spectrum of the work that they do, but I do definitely know that there one exists, and that might be a good question that we can route back to them and get back to you on, unless someone else has from that my team is a little more familiar with it. But I know that's something that our organization or our agency has been trying to stand up because it is a need in the community. So that is a question that we can take back, or I can take back.
So
That said,
Ramon, sorry. So that resource is already live. So the mayor announced it, I think it was like 2 days ago. So it's basically a website with a lot of resources, and different city agencies are working together to provide those services. So if you go on that website, you would come across a number of resources, including access to legal counsel, to be able to represent clients if they're being harassed or if they're being, if they're being taken to housing court. So that resource is now available online.
And we also, just so you know, one of the little bragging moments for Palante, but I do not know if you guys remember the landlords that ended up in jail a few years ago because they were harassing a tenant. We were the ones that did it behind the scenes. And then this is my brownie points personally, because we work very closely with the district attorney's office. They settled. They came to a settlement, and one of them had to come and do community service at Palante, which was terrific. So yes, it's very true. And if you look at our Facebook, it's a big chubby guy. That's the landlord of the harassment. So we work very closely with the tenant protection unit in the state, and we have a reputation, for going after bad landlords. The thing is, and in fact, in that family, the fact that they came to us, after the landlord basically harassed everybody else in the building and they left, they were the only tenants in the building. It's the Adam Cohen. If you guys want to Google the Adam Cohen case, you're going to see these 3 landlords that were harassing a Mexican family in East Harlem. But as a result of everything, at the end of the day, HRA came up. And the reason why I think he really went to jail at the end of the day was because of the cash assistance from HRA that was paying the landlord, and the landlord was not acknowledging it. But sure enough, at the end of the case, they settled, and the families even got their permanent resident papers to be in this country as a result of that. So we always encourage tenants to, not allow their immigration status stop them from, being bullied. They should be able, and they can always come to us. We also work very closely with the New York City, with the mayor's task force. So we've been able to, as an organization, we've been able to conduct raids in buildings with this task force that the mayor put together, which is terrific. But when it comes to the legal status, right, and the documents, I mean, we advise clients, put your kid's social security number, right? These kids were born here. Put your kid's social security number so you could get this one-shot deal. Is that the right advice? Does that turn into hampering any paperwork that they might have in process to become permanent residents? I can't hear you.
That's because I was on mute.
I do that all the time.
I'll defer this to to either Camilla or Shoshana, who could speak a little more to that, and also they could bring it back to your question about the impact of applying on the status. So take it away, ladies.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. So I know that there's a lot of concern, like you mentioned, about the impact of applying for a benefit on an individual's legal status or future legal status. And oftentimes this is connected to the policy of public charge. And that's a term that's been thrown around in numerous different ways. And it's been in the news lately because there have been some court decisions that impact the implementation. And first and foremost, I want to clarify that public charge, which is basically an assessment made of an individual's eligibility for becoming a legal permanent resident, a green card holder, that it is only the determination of whether or not someone is eligible for that based upon a number of different factors. Included among them may be their use of benefit programs. That is limited to those applying for legal permanent residence, green cards. It's not related to citizenship. And there are also groups who are completely excluded from those determinations, like asylum seekers and refugees and some other protected categories. When it comes to the actual decision of applying and whether or not that can impact, it's very complex and there are many factors that play into this. And it is often something that is assessed on a case-by-case basis. So we essentially advise anyone with questions about public charge to reach out to the Action NYC hotline. The phone number for that is 1-800-354-0365. And you can just say that you're calling about public charge and you'll be able to get legal advice about how specifically your immigration status may be impacted by application for benefits. And the court cases that I mentioned recently were in relation to the implementation of the public charge determinations, and they were determined to be on hold throughout the COVID crisis. So those who may have pending applications or are to be submitting an application, those would not be susceptible to a public charge determination while the COVID state of emergency is underway.
What is the name of the department that you call this? Action what again?
Action NYC. And if you need the phone number again, it's 1-800-354-0365. And you can just say public charge and they'll help provide some assistance on that.
And that assume that because they have translations, right? So you can speak to someone.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Great. So, but in general, what you think with pandemic, does it put them at risk to apply for one-shot deal? Is this a loan? A one-shot deal is a loan.
I have a little bit less familiarity with the one-shot deal. However, I'm happy to turn it over to Camilla or Ramon to speak to that piece. But it's sort of in the same realm.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get myself on video. There we go. Just to add to what Shoshana was saying, the public charge issues are around cash assistance, a continuing income, additional income that you're receiving. The one-time one-shot deal would not be part of a public charge analysis, but very often somebody who is receiving a one-shot deal is also receiving something that may qualify for public charge. So it's sometimes very hard to separate the two, because very often when somebody meets some of the requirements for a one-shot deal, they're also receiving something else that does put them in the public charge analysis.
But just to be clear, and that's what I wanted to hear, thank you, Camilla, for clarifying this. A one-shot deal, which is a loan a low interest loan that you pay back to the city, is not part of the public charge.
The cash, it's a loan that's given by the state and is not in the cash, in the income maintenance category. That's right.
Great, thank you. And I think that's important because, we advise our clients, like, stop borrowing money from, a loan shark or el primo, el vecino, the folks of you guys that speak Spanish, you guys know what I'm saying, it's like anybody that's out there. You could get a legitimate loan from the city, right, by applying through HRA, Access HRA, and that is not going to affect your the paperwork that you're doing. And that's what I was trying to get through to folks, because and then thank you, Shoshana, thank you, Camilla, for clarifying this, because ignorance is terrible, right? We're like too blind. And we know a lot of our folks have, literally they've gone hungry because the little bit of money that they've had, which they could have used for food, are being paid for towards the rent, just because of the landlord is, again, knocking on doors and doing all these things. And I think this is really key. Now, going back to these one-shot deals, because we're really interested in all the benefits, right, that are available. We have, it's not just undocumented, we have documented families here that are in the process of their citizenship. And then they also have, immigrant families that are citizens right now. They have dual citizenship here and back home. But now when you look at, the type of benefits that they can in terms of cash assistance, the SNAP is the food stamps where they can eat. When it comes to all of that, when a one-shot deal, what would be the criteria to actually be able to apply? Because what we have heard, and I do not know if it's that, you guys are like literally building an airplane when it's on the air to be able to help everybody, which I think is terrific. I mean, the fact that Mr. Flores said that you guys got the waiver, you had to require in-person interviews, and now you're being able to do it over the phone. But when it comes to our folks, that have applied, what is the turnaround time that they should hear back from someone on an to get interviewed? Like in general, not specific. And then the second thing is that, we know we're going to give them a copy of the manual so that they can prepare all the paperwork beforehand. But are there any tips that you guys can give us to make sure that they put in? I mean, nobody that we represent or nobody that's calling Palante, nobody's rich. I can tell you that right now. They would not be coming to Palante if they were rich, And then second is that they're free. So now because of Shoshana, because of Camilla, because of the rest of your team, we're able to kind of like relax a little bit. It's okay. So we want to make sure that, we're paying our taxes, we got our TINs, we're doing all of that stuff. We just need this little help one time. Now it's clear that we can apply without having any repercussions on our papers. But then now going back to the paperwork, how long, if they were to apply for one-shot deal, how long on average would it take? And second, because there's some questions already lined up that people have been rejected. And I have a feeling that the reason why they were rejected is because they did not complete the application correctly. And maybe, something must have happened. I cannot see HRA rejecting a family during the pandemic. Something must have gone wrong is what I'm thinking, and maybe the tenant, this is a new age for us. We're learning how to fill out applications on with our phones and things like that. What do you guys think?
Well, to the first question about how long between submission and getting an interview, before, about when it first started, it was a long time. I was down about 40% of my workforce because they were either sick or unable to get onto the system because of, limitations with access to equipment and the like. But over the past probably 2 months, and with the tapering down of the application submitted, we should be able to get back to you within 3 days. We monitor this every day. So actually, every morning I wake up, the first thing I do is I pull a report to see how, and of course the report is always like a day behind, but to see how many interviews we got within the last 2 days. I mean, how many applications we received in the last 2 days, and how many interviews we've completed of those submitted, so that we can pinpoint and try to keep up with the interviews as they come in. So if you have not received a interview call within 3 days from when you applied, I would think that you may have missed that call, and that's a trigger for maybe you to inquire about missing your interview. And there is a number that we have that we're working with our the part of the agency that receives constituent phone calls, and we get a lot of those questions. We get a lot of the I don't know if I missed my interview calls. So what happens when somebody makes that call is they send that to us, not me directly, but to one of our centers, and say, Ramon Flores, whatever confirmation number XYZ, called and is inquiring about the interview, we review the case, and we would reach out to the individual and try to complete the eligibility interview. I will be perfectly frank. Initially, because this is a new process for us, mistakes do happen, and I wouldn't necessarily blame your constituents. You know, sometimes, and I've seen cases, and I'll be very honest about my operation. I've seen individual cases where, we say we called, we called, but I can't prove that I called, so we call again, right? When that comes. So we work to be very flexible in if we reject for a failure to do the interview. The next area that is of your concern is the area related to documents, right? It is going to be difficult for me to go through all the different documents that you need, but always the main ones, identity, proof of your household size, like how many people, and this is for ongoing, because your household size determines the amount of benefits you'll get ongoing. For a one-shot deal, the household size matters because you could include who resides in there, so who else contributes to the rent, so that makes the determination of how feasible it is to pay rent going forward. That makes that assessment or that analysis doable. From the one-shot deal, the proof of the arrears. So one of the things that I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm jumping because I just out the corner of my eye I saw a question related to landlords giving ledgers. So I know that has been a problem in the past, and then I know you're going to talk about it later or answer the questions later. But that is similar, something that we try to be flexible with as well. Like if you don't have the proof of the arrears, but you're in court and you have your court papers that indicate that you have the arrears, right? That we work with that, and we reach out to the landlords and say, hey, you want to get paid, right? Like you're taking this person to court because you want the money at the end of the day, and it's all, the money talks, right? So you should get this information to us, and you'll work towards getting your money. So that's one of the things that we try to be as flexible about. However, that being said, we always want or need the most up-to-date rent owed amount, mainly because if we're not gonna pay a piece of it, and then you still owe more, that just doesn't make sense. So that is the one area. So, but when you do that so the way that the one-shot deal works for rent arrears, as I mentioned before, is you do the initial interview with us, and then you do an interview with a specific part of my program area that is specific to housing and homelessness diversion. So that they do a different type of interview that's really only about the rent arrears. How did you get into the rent arrears? What it is? How much you owe? It's very narrowly tailored to the rent issue. One of their roles is to talk to landlords, and we're not always successful, to be frank. Some landlords don't want to cooperate because what they want is the apartment, right? And you mentioned that earlier, where they want to move people out because they want to make it luxury or whatever the scenarios are. And that's when I then plug again the part of the agency that was recently stood up about tenant protection. But the main those three, identifying who you are, who resides in your household for purposes of determining how it's going to get paid going forward, and the proof of the arrears is what we have. Again, I do have the guide, and again I will circulate it because it's available for everyone. Proof of arrears, there's like 5 or 6 different ways to do it. I just don't remember them all off the top of my head, but I will be sure to get those out tomorrow or this evening as soon as I get a chance to. Both those guides.
You could make it available to us in both English and Spanish. We'll circulate it immediately, and it's a public document, right? So maybe we could even, we would definitely want to be.
I'll get it to you. Not a problem.
So much. So let me ask you something, Mr. Flores, and before and then I'm going to pass it over to Robert and Jacari to continue to start on with the Q&A. But because I think I have the most questions, right? I should probably shut up, but I got people, so I need to make sure I have an answer. So how are tenants notified if they were accepted or not accepted?
Everyone must get a notice of determination. That notice is, it basically says on X date you applied for whatever particular grant, whether it's ongoing, whether it's a one-time grant, and then the decision will come out. If you were approved, it'll tell you how much. And that's a must. If someone doesn't get that notice, then I'm going to end up having to reassess the case. That's the bottom line. So that's something that if you got rejected and we're not informed, that's something we want to know about, because we'll have to see if it's a worker issue who didn't finish the process, if it's a system issue. But every application that comes in must get a decision at the end of base of that request.
But is that,
There's no wiggle room there.
is that decision, do they get a notification? Because we one of the questions that we have, in fact, the first question that we have is that they were rejected. And I asked the client, well, how did you get rejected? When they called us, which was right before we jumped onto this Zoom call. And he said that he went online and it said he was denied.
But right, so when you create an account online,
okay,
you have a web account, like a bank account, like any other account that you create. So we do try to push a lot of information through that, but you should still get a paper notice, unless for whatever reason, even if it was by accident, there is an option on the account that says to go paperless. If you indicate that you want to go paperless, I go paperless in all different types of contexts, then you wouldn't get that paper notice. But if you didn't select go paperless, you should get a notice. And if you didn't, what I would suggest, and of course not on this chat, but any individual who like that individual, if you can reach out to me offline and shoot me their information, I could look into why or what happened as far as that particular case. And that a lot of inquiries that come in through that information line can be inquiries like that. Like, I applied, I never heard from them. That could happen. That might happen. And if it does, and I'll get you that phone number as well. So I have 3 things to get you: that phone number and the 2 guides. And that's where you would, and then you get a tracking number, and we have to respond within X amount of days. But a question like that, unless they chose to go paperless and ask HRA, there's no reason why they should not get a notice.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, this is terrific. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much, everyone. Robert, should we start the Q&A?
Absolutely. We've had several questions come in, so we can go back to the ones that I noticed in the beginning, and then circle back to the ones that have come in more recently. I think one of the first ones was, I have applied for the COVID-19 rent relief, and my landlord told me that they sent him a W-9 form to fill out. That it's meant that I have been approved.
I think I can answer that. I think they're referring to the state rent relief, not the HRA. The folks that we have in the city right now are from the city, so it's a different rent relief, and it's not through the rent relief grants. So what I can do is, Robert, if you could take that person's information and we'll get back to them.
Yeah, we'll have
but
that.
I would assume that it would be correct, yes, that they would have been approved, but we do not know.
Soy Agustín, yo apliqué para que me ayuden con el pago de mi renta, la cual tengo atrasada desde marzo. Soy deshabilitado y el landlord y su abogada me dieron hasta el 11 de agosto y me acosan constantemente, pero no sé por qué me rechazaron mi solicitud.
Okay. Similar, that one, I think we can always look into the reason for the rejection, and then follow up with how to correct it, or depending on how long ago it was rejected, we might need to just go through the reapplication and interview process in case it's been so long that things may have changed. But that's one that I can't answer, obviously off I would need more particulars. But Elsie, if you can get me that information of your constituent, we can look into that for sure. And as I said earlier, rejections would be fairly limited at this juncture to whether it was to failure to verify something, which could be corrected, failure to complete an interview, which also we can correct that. And then the only other one is that you have too much income, which I don't necessarily think that's going to be a big issue for this panel. And then, I mean, for the panel, excuse me, for this group. The only other thing I did want to mention, and that we probably should jump into before we continue with the questions, is what type of immigrant statuses are eligible for benefits, just so that everyone has a foundation. So for example, for ongoing cash assistance and pretty much the one-time assistance, the household members, complete and undocumented individuals without any status, unfortunately, that's the group that is the one that's, I guess, most at risk, because they likely would not be eligible for many benefits. However, we do, if there are citizen children or other children with status in the household, then you could apply on behalf of the children and still be be eligible for some of these one-time assistance grants. So to be clear, if you're undocumented, you have a child in your household that is that's obviously that is related to you and that you're cared for, you can apply for the benefits on behalf of that child and can be potentially eligible if you meet the other eligibility requirements. Currently we have a pretty large ongoing caseload of individuals who have what's known as child-only cases, and those are cases of many individuals who are undocumented that receive benefits on behalf of their children. So that is something that is available. However, I did want to just bring that up when it comes to the questions related to reasons for rejection, because immigration status is something that has to be addressed during the eligibility process. And I don't know if Shoshana or Camilla, you want to add anything to that particular part of the eligibility discussion.
I did actually. Thank you so much. I just wanted to put out there that we encourage everyone to apply for benefits, regardless of what your status may be or what you think your status may be. We make these determinations on an individual case-by-case basis, and your eligibility will be reviewed. We recommend that you apply for the benefits that you would need, and that you include as much documentation that you have within that application. And then from there, a determination of your eligibility will be made. So even if you think that you would not qualify or you are undocumented, we highly recommend that you do still apply.
Sure. Okay.
Sure, so I can go on to another question.
Mhm.
There are some issues that may interfere with clients getting grants. Landlords are not cooperating with tenants to provide accurate ledgers. What can be done to help the tenants seeking help?
That is a little bit of a tough one. However, they can't put the tenant out without going through the court process. So the tenant will get rent demands. They will get, because the landlord has to take certain steps first before they can even bring the case to court. And I think, and again, I don't want to get into the legality of it. I happen to practice law in my previous life, and it happened to be in housing court. But they do have to show some initial steps that they did before they can, try to evict you, unless they're going to try to do an illegal eviction. And at some point in the process, they will have to tell you how much you owe. And that'll always be a good starting point. So maybe you don't have the most up-to-date ledger, but they will make rent demands in some context before they can bring you to court. And if they do bring you to court, the petition for non-payment has to indicate how much you owe or for how long you owed. So while they might be difficult with the ledger, it's really going to be difficult for them to put someone out without having that documentation filed with the court in some form. And as a tenant, and in court, you're the respondent. As a respondent, you have the right to all those court documents, and you have to be served with them. So you will get some form of documentation to confirm the amount owed, and then that can be used to submit the when you submit your rent arrears request. I know it doesn't answer everything because I know that there are unfortunately I don't know enough about this area that I mentioned before related to advocacy for tenants in this fairly recent part of the agency. So I don't know, Vanessa or Julio or Camilla, do you know much more that is there some way for that part of the agency helps with this particular issue where landlords are not being cooperative?
I would say for those particular clients, I will always encourage them to reach out to their closest home base. I know that they provide case management and not legal assistance in court, but they are an advocate between the tenants and the landlord. So I would suggest to maybe involve a home-based program. I know that they also provide like a financial assistance for tenants as well. But they can be an advocate and they can be in between basically the client, the tenant and the landlord.
Let me just jump in here for a second. So if a landlord is not providing a rent ledger, it's on purpose. And what we know for a fact is that although we have some wonderful rent laws that were passed last June, there was a gap in that. And the gap on those that was not been fixed is that if a landlord is able to combine two apartments and make them one, he can charge no rents. So of course the landlord will have an incentive to vacate and not get the money, that tenant might be behind on one apartment, the apartment next to it would be vacant. So, when it comes to those things, and like Mr. Flores said, the key thing is to know that only the courts can evict you. And if the landlord intentionally did not provide a ledger for you so that you could get in this money, that actually works on your favor. So the landlord doesn't want to give you the rent ledger, just make sure you have it in writing. Send the landlord a little note saying, I would like to apply for assistance to be able to pay your rent, but you're not providing me the rent ledger. You take that note, it could be in English and in Spanish, whatever language you want, as long as you send it certified mail to confirm that the landlord received that. So when the landlord initiates a court proceeding, because remember, the only way for anybody to get you out of your apartment in New York, only New York, is they have to take you to court. The judge has to see you. The judge has to hear from you. And then the judge is the one that signs the marshal's notice to allow the marshal to come to your house and kick you out. So to get to the marshal, it could be next year. That's the reality. So if the landlord not giving you a ledger, we could talk that you might be looking at the judge, at the end of 2021, saying, Judge, Your Honor, he didn't want to give me a copy of the ledger. That's why I don't have his money. So what you need to, and tell everyone in all those Zoom calls that we've had, we are people that like to pay our rents. We are people that, we come to this country and we're working people. And the people that are here on our call are also working, even if they were born here. The point is that you need to look at this pandemic as an opportunity and know that you have rights. It's an opportunity for you to know what resources are there. That's why these wonderful people at 8:30 p.m. at night to accommodate everybody's schedule, because we're also sensitive to that, to make sure that if those of you guys are back at work, won't interrupt your jobs or anything. But you need to understand that you have rights. So for the person, take a little piece of paper, write a little note, dear Mr. Landlord, or you don't have to say dear, you can say to Mr. Landlord. I've asked for a rent ledger several times so I can apply for services to get you your rent money, but you refuse to. Just make sure you make the investments in the certified mail, so when the landlord has to go hire an attorney to take you to court, before the attorney, he's going to send you more notices, by the way, so you don't have to wait to get to court. And you just start compiling all the paperwork, and whatever paperwork you get, be sure to give us a call, and we will help you navigate the whole court process and also get you on board with applying for the one-shot deal, which will be done online through Access HRA. But don't think that you cannot apply for one-shot deal because the ledger is not available. Mr. Flores said that there are different ways. but also is that, you know, document it. Start documenting your things. Get your lease, get all the things that's required. And once we circulate the manual, I think it's really going to help us out a lot.
And I will add,
Yes.
Elsie, that you know, in addition to sending that letter certified mail, we do have, we provide legal counsel to people who need it. And so if you call us or if your clients call us and they are being taken to housing court, because that's actually one of the things that we ask when somebody's applying for a one-shot deal. We ask, you know, are you in housing court proceedings right now? Are you at risk of eviction? Have you received a notice to vacate? Those questions, for at least for me, when I ask them and I hear the answer to, that tells me whether or not this request is an emergency, right? Because if you have received a notice of eviction or an order to vacate, right? Like that to me just says, okay, this person is going to be evicted in a week or two, or, you know, that type of thing. So we do ask those questions, and, you know, just make sure that if that is the case, you should ask for an attorney, and we can provide an attorney to represent you in housing court proceedings for free. We can connect you with a lawyer from NILAG or from the Legal Aid Society or from any of the other providers for free.
This is through the courts or through by contacting HRA?
Through HRA. So this is through HRA. We provide legal counsel through HRA. We have contracted with organizations to provide those lawyers.
How do you get to the attorney? Because we've always, when the courts, because of the right to counsel, present yourself in court, then the judge, depending on the zip code that you're in, right?
Yeah, so
program you're talking about.
Yes, and you can request, there's a number that you can call for the Office of Civil Justice here at HRA that we can provide. But also, if you are already in housing court, you can ask for assistance while you're there, and you can say, can you tell me where the HRA office is? Right. And you go to the HRA office, and that's the people that can connect you with an attorney.
Gotcha. This is great. Thank you. So let's go on. This is perfect. Thank you, Vanessa. Other questions, Robert?
Certainly, so many. What advice do you have for someone who is undocumented and unemployed, have cancer and need medical treatment?
Well, and you know what? I don't want to get into too much, but I know that there's, this from my days representing Medicaid, that there are certain Medicaid coverage that you can get for, even if you're undocumented, for emergency situations. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. I don't know, Shoshana, how familiar you are with that, but or Camilla, I know we've talked about this in the past. So we can probably look further into that. I don't know, if you guys have anything to add for that particular situation? Also, I would say that, is there anyone else in the household that we could that might qualify for the benefits that resides in that household? And if there isn't, that does make it difficult for the cash assistance part, but there may be some Medicaid related assistance available.
Yeah, I think, like Ramon said, we've definitely seen cases like this come up over the years. And I would say send it to us offline. I think that's kind of the best way to go forward. There are a lot of advocacy groups that work with this population around these particular kinds of health issues. We actually just had a case, that was relatively similar recently. And there might be some things that can be done, just like Ramon was saying. So I'd really encourage you. I'll say you have our emails. Please see if we can connect afterwards and we can talk privately about this case.
Robert, if you could help me out at capturing the person's information.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. Yes, I'll direct a message to them, and I'm going to jump over to the Spanish channel now to read some of our questions that are posted in Spanish. Yo tengo una pregunta sobre el seminario de hoy. Yo soy la inquilina secundaria, ocupo 2 cuartos, pago 1,300 al mes. La pregunta es, ¿hay ayuda o algunos beneficios para nosotros los inquilinos secundarios?
So, brushing up on my Spanish, I'm assuming that's the secondary tenant. Yes, somebody who is a secondary tenant, can apply for a rent arrears grant, and we would just need the information of the primary tenant. But yes, you can apply. Just because you're a secondary tenant does not mean that you may not be eligible for a grant. The one thing I would say is, again, just like any other rent arrears grant, you would need to show the total amount owed, an ability to pay in the future, if that's, help from somebody else, and that depends on your personal situation. But just the fact that you're a secondary tenant doesn't mean that you can't apply for a one-shot deal or even an ongoing cash assistance grant that where you get a monthly rent assistance.
And to add to Mrs. Flores' statement, so there's an option within HRA when the client applies for a one-shot deal. There's an option that says, who do you pay rent to, directly to a landlord or to a person that lives with you? So it gives the person the option. Ultimately, like Mr. Flores said, they will have to provide the required document in order to process the application.
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta. Hice la aplicación para food stamps y me agregaron asistencia pública, pero me dan para ayuda con la renta solo $115, ya que lo poco que me ponen para comida no me da para fin de mes. Quiero saber si hay otro tipo de ayuda, ya que solo hay un ciudadano en nuestra familia.
So that would depend. So budgets all depend on household size and whatever income is in the household. So what I would suggest there is, at the time that they initially applied, they may have been in one situation and now they're in a different situation, which could affect a change, which might result in a change in the budget. I would need particulars to see what that household situation is, but there are limits. Definitely, there are limits. So, for example, and they're very low. I understand that Elsie mentioned it previously, but for example, a household of one person gets $215 per month in shelter assistance. A household of two gets a little more. A household of three gets $400. So it increases, but at a small rate, especially New York City. So I do recognize that is an issue. But I would say for this particular individual, if there has been a change in the household, or they're looking to see if they can have their budget reviewed to see if they should have more money, receive more benefits, that is something that's doable. If it's a SNAP only case, and it sounds like he only receives SNAP, but then he mentioned he does get a shelter, so that's something that we can look at. That's something that's within my scope of jurisdiction. So again, if we have we can look into the particulars to see if there's something that has changed in the household. We can have someone reach out and talk to this individual to see if they get receiving what the maximum that they're eligible for under their current circumstances. So we would look at, is there income in the household? Did your household size change? Things of that nature. So I couldn't just, I just can't provide an answer just to that, but that's one that we would need to look into the specifics of the case, which it sounds like a lot of these seem to be, rather than more general ones. So, as I said, we should definitely get a list of some of these so we can follow up accordingly.
It's gonna be a long list.
I was just gonna say that. I know I could tell, but you know what? It is what these are the type of questions we get all the time anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're just getting them from one single source. So that's what we're here for. So we can definitely find out further. I do, just as a time check, want to mention I have to be run around 9 o'clock. Help put the kids to bed, but let's continue.
Just in case there were people that didn't get that number, I think a couple of people asked for it again, and I have it written down. But to confirm, if we could just put that on the air again, the public charge number. I
have that number. It's 800-354 0365, right, Shoshana?
Yes, that's right. Sorry, it took me a little bit to unmute myself, but yes, that's correct.
Great. Let's go for the next question. Let's take a few more questions. It's
Sí,
8:45.
sí, pero la ayuda solo le dan a la gente con papeles. Si yo la pido, me dice que como mi niña no nació en este país, no tengo derecho a nada. Como no pago mis taxes, también no califico. Y hay mucha, pero mucha gente que vive al igual que yo, que solo renta una habitación y por tener un cuarto no hay. Y creo que así vivimos miles de indocumentados, no solo yo. No queremos que nos mantengan, solo que pedimos un poco de ayuda para salir uno poco de esta situación, puestos que también este virus deja muchas secuelas en nuestra salud. Solo quiero ver si pueden tocar un poquito este tema, que no sea solo los que tienen departamentos.
Okay, that one's tough. Because we are bound by statutory and regulatory requirements, and at this juncture, as far as having absolutely no status, it is difficult for us to or I don't even want to say difficult. I just don't think that there's an ability to issue benefits in that situation. However, this particular constituent mentioned having a child that's a resident, so there may be relief for him, for this particular family, because a child who's a resident is the household, now his household may be eligible for benefits based on behalf of that child. So we would that's a general question that we would look into and get back to Elsie about, just as a general matter. And Shoshana, Camilla, has anything changed recently that I'm not aware of related to that, that unfortunate situation of being completely, not having any document, being undocumented?
Yeah, I think Ramon, you said it right. It's a really difficult analysis, and unfortunately, none of our state and federal regulations that govern how we're able to give this kind of assistance have changed during this time. The one place I would turn you to is the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. During this time, they've been able to get a number of private grants that are trying to be helpful to folks who are undocumented, so they have this in mind. So I guess the two places I would say, one, Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs for any private funding that there might be something there, but I'll be perfectly honest, I don't really think there's too much. The other part I would say is I think this would also be an important action NYC referral. I think a lot of times people come here and define themselves as being undocumented, and there may be something that a qualified immigration attorney might be able to do to help. It might be something as simple as figuring out a way to get some kind of application going that would make somebody eligible for Medicaid who wasn't eligible for Medicaid before. So I would want to encourage everybody who is in this situation to at least speak to an immigration attorney to make sure that there is nothing that can be done about their status that would ultimately help with their benefit eligibility.
Yeah, and I do apologize that we don't have better response for that one, because that is a tough situation. That said, we will look into that specific nuance that they do have an LPR child in the household.
So that's a child that was not born here and is an undocumented child that's going to school.
But the child's also undocumented? I thought he said the child was.
Well, the child's also undocumented.
Ah, okay, all right. That makes it more difficult.
Yeah. If you guys can get back to us on that, I mean, I'd be very interested also to learn. Let's continue with it. Is it one more question, Robert, or how many questions do you still have in the pipeline?
We have a fair number of questions to get to.
Okay, let's get one more, and then Mr. Flores, if it's okay, can we share these questions with you, and you could help us respond by by next week, and we could give them the answers by, let's say, Monday of next week. Tomorrow's Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let's try to get through as many as we can, and if you want, do a couple more. That's not a problem. I don't know how my colleagues, I don't want to, keep all my colleagues. I don't want to speak for you guys, so let me, you can, shoot me an email, say, be quiet if you want, but I, you know, we can do a couple more, and then yes, if anything that we can't get to, we will do our best to respond to. Again, if it's specific to an individual situation, we would need case information or details. If it's general, we can do it. I think another good place to provide information about is to give you a list of, we have a guide as well of all the different immigration statuses and what type of benefits they're eligible for, so that somebody who considers themselves undocumented really might be in a temporary protected status or applying for temporary protected status, which might give you some benefits. So that's that's something that I think would be helpful for your constituents.
That'd be terrific. Thank you.
So I have a question in English here. I haven't got an answer from the COVID-19 program from the city, but the landlord keeps sending me letters, and I got 2 14 days notice letters, and they also want me to pay for the arrears even when I apply for the program already.
Right. So the landlord, I can answer that. The landlord is going to apply, he's mandated to send you those notices so that he can commence a housing court case. Just because you apply doesn't mean that the landlord has been made aware of it. And just because you apply doesn't mean that you're going to get rejected or approved. What we recommend you do is that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You're waiting for a grant, but we do not know if you're going to get approved for that. You should definitely apply for a one-shot deal and begin the process. And remember that there's an eviction moratorium until October 1st. So it gives you some time to plan ahead. As I've always said, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And we know that we have this rent arrears, and then we know the landlord is looking to get his or her money that he's entitled to. Still to today, because the bills in Albany have not passed, we need to take the precautionary measures to address that. And by doing so, what I would say is that although you applied for the state of COVID rent relief, that is a grant, you should still apply for a one-shot deal through HRA. Next question.
Necesito ayuda de cómo cambiar o poner mi nombre en el lease. Yo tengo 15 años pagando. Mi hermana, que es la que aparece en el lease, no vive aquí. Necesito aplicar por One Shot Deal. ¿Cómo lo hago? Gracias.
Okay, the least part we can help.
Okay, thank you, because that's what we can't help with, but we can help with the other part. So we're going to be a good team then.
We will have to, but it's a very tricky subject because it's been many, many years that that your sister moved out, and that might have a reaction, a very negative reaction towards your ability to stay in that apartment. It really depends on whether or not who signed the lease all these years. Did she sign it? Did you sign it? Was the landlord notified? So what I would recommend is on Monday, our office will be closed tomorrow. But on Monday, if you could give us a call after 10:30, we could do an intake and assess the situation and see if we can help you put the lease under your name. But I guess the other question would be, because it's a two-part question, is can someone without the lease that's not under their name, can they apply for HRA for one-shot deal?
Yeah, everyone can apply, that's for sure. But as I mentioned, I think earlier in this discussion, the impact would be your right to remain in the household, right? So let's say you never get that lease transferred, but the landlord's going to let you stay there regardless, and you can get some other document to verify that you have the right to stay in the apartment, even if it's not necessarily the lease, then no problem. But if the landlord is really not, if the landlord's issue is really not about the money, it's about you not being a leaseholder, that's going to be a different problem. But as far as whether you can apply to pay for back rent, yeah, the answer is yes. However, if at the end of the day, or when push comes to shove, if you can't establish that you're going to have the right to stay, then you're likely going to get denied, because that's something that we have to be able to to show or to confirm, because then if not, we'd be paying money for you only to get put out later.
Mhm.
We're asking for a repetition of phone numbers.
Okay, the same number?
Just to repeat the phone numbers, plural. So it may refer to
Well, the
one or
phone
two
number
mentioned.
to Action NYC is 1-800-354-0365.
And I have a comment regarding a number, calling a number and not getting anywhere. I'll read that in Spanish.
Mhm.
Yo llamé al número que decía para ayuda, solo me tomaron los datos y me dieron un número que está roto y no existe, así de simple, y no hay más ayuda.
Mhm. I don't
That
understand the question.
I'll say I don't know which agency provided or what agency they're trying to call, so I really can't speak to that.
Right.
We'll see if there's a follow-up comment to that.
Maybe they're referring to the 718 number that we've been giving for HRA. But it's hard to tell. Let's go to the next question, and maybe they can come back to us. Just Jacari or Robert, if you guys can send that person a question to be more specific, what agency?
Yo recibí por la aplicación Access HRA la respuesta de fui rechazado por los ingresos del hogar y no lo creo justo porque a mi Social Security solamente me da $927 mensuales y mi esposa trabaja de 20 a 25 horas solamente.
That is, that would be an income rejection, which may be legitimate. We don't control how much. We have basically a table. A household of two that makes more than this money is eligible or not. We don't there's no sliding scale, no case by case basis. That's a pretty much a hard and fast a rule, unfortunately. And if it's a household of two, I don't know off the top of my head what the max amount of income that household could have in order to be eligible. But if someone's working 20, 25 hours, even if they're not making a ton of money, plus the $900 a week, and if it's only a household size of two, that might sound like someone that does get rejected, unfortunately. And again, that's just that's part of the statutory and regulatory construct that we work within, unfortunately. And I am sorry to say that.
Just want to clarify, I think what, and I did receive a call earlier today from this person. It's the same question. I think what happened was it was supposed to be a one-shot deal that he was supposed to apply for. And then it HRA probably has something to do with that, because I was like, apply, right? So I think he applied for the whole thing. Is there
Got
any way that we could go back and just look at his application?
Yes, get me the information and we will look into that. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
If that's what the issue is, yeah.
I think that's what it is. And I think I'm partially at fault for that, because I've been telling people apply, but we haven't had the demo yet,
Understood.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next question. And so
A mí no me gustaría llegar hasta un desalojo o en corte con el dueño, hasta ahora sin trabajo y muy difícil pagar la renta. Solo me gustaría saber de algún alivio solo para renta por 2 o 3 meses. Gracias.
So what I would suggest in this particular instance is the one-shot deal is probably exactly what this individual is needs. However, because there's no employment, they likely have no income. So I would suggest trying to apply for the full ongoing benefits. And as part of the full ongoing benefits, you may be eligible for rent arrears that you accumulated prior to getting on assistance. That's something that happens often. So again, I don't know what this person's individual status is or things of that nature, how many people are in the household, but I would encourage that individual to apply for an ongoing grant since there's no income in the household. And as part of the ongoing grant, you can request the assistance to pay arrears for the period prior to your application. And that's also on Access HRA. And Julio, you mentioned before, because since you have more familiarity or expertise with Access HRA, there is, when you're doing the ongoing application process, there is a place for you to note additional like emergency situations or additional debt you might owe or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Ramon. So at the beginning of the one-shot deal application, the application asks the applicant for like emergency needs. Does the person need paying for utilities, arrears? So the questionnaire, the application asks those questions through Access HRA. When the person applies for a one-shot deal through there, the application starts with that type of question. What emergency needs the person has, as it can be utilities or it can be for rent arrears.
Yo apliqué por HRA, pero por el pago de una sola vez, pero no he tenido ninguna respuesta. ¿Cuánto tiempo tengo que esperar? Gracias.
So that would depend on the type of grant. If someone applies and they haven't heard from us just for the interview within 3 days, I guess my first question is whether they actually received the interview. Second question is the type of grant they applied for, because if it's rent related, they may have a secondary interview with this homelessness diversion unit that I mentioned before that's specific related to rent. And then from there, it would take, if there's documents that need to be submitted, we give people a certain amount of time for them to submit it, and they can ask for more time. So all that depends. I'm not sure where in the process this particular individual is that had this question. So this is another one where I would say that we should just get some details about their particular demographics, name, case number if they have it, if not their address or their DOBs. That way we can look up their case and take it from there, because I'd have to see it all depends on what comes in initially and where it is. So as I said before, if they just applied, let's say they applied yesterday, they should get that first phone call within 3 days. Based on that phone call, it would determine whether, that's where we're going to identify whatever this is a one-shot deal, whether it's rent arrears or utilities. And if it's rent arrears, that needs to go to another unit for the housing related interview, they would get another call. So if when we get the details, if this person applied back in, July or some point, then there's a problem there, which we would have to address as well. So for anybody that we asked for some additional information or details, I know a lot of people don't know case numbers. So, name, DOB, and address, that usually helps us narrow it down. We get a lot of common names, especially in New York. I think Ramon Flores, for example, there's a ton of us in New York City. There's a ton of our Floreses in our agency. So I get Ruth Flores mail all the time. So, so just as much of that demographic makes our life a little easier to find them in our system and get to the answer to the question.
Well, this is terrific, guys. I don't want to abuse your time. I wanted to thank you honestly for doing all, sticking around and helping us out. I think that we're gonna close this session because I want to make sure that if I call you, because I know I'm gonna call each and every one of you, Vanessa, you too, that you got it's Elsia. So we want to use that time to be able to help those individual cases, because I think that's what we're getting at right now, which are individual cases. So if I can recommend something, Robert and team, if I can recommend that we go back and get all these questions, and then I don't know if you guys can see me, but something happened to my computer right now.
I can see you.
We can see you.
You guys can see me. Excellent. I cannot see myself. This is terrific. So so what I think we should do though is that we should get all these questions case by case, and Jacari should be able to help us, and then we're gonna go back to the client, and we have their information because they had to register with us, so that we could get their case number, the date of birth information, that we could give it to the team that's offered to help us, which are our panelists today, and then we could come back to you guys with with solutions to all of these cases. What do you guys think? What does the rest of the team think? Mr. Flores and all of you folks.
Oh,
That works.
yeah, that works for us.
Yes,
And
okay.
I unfortunately probably won't have good news for every question, but you know, it'll be frank, and we can help, and then you can solution from there. It's better the more you know, right? So no matter what, we will get back on those questions.
Excellent. So great. So I think we're gonna just conclude this then. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for everyone that's been on the call. Robert and Jacari, I lean on you, and Daniel, thank you for helping us translate this session. And clearly, our team, on behalf of our team, to the folks at HRA and Department of Social Services, we really thank you, and we look forward to creating a real partnership so that we can help the families that are in need. And I think, you guys sticking around this long to complete these questions as much as possible, it goes, does not go unnoticed. So I thank you for your time and for the wonderful information, and we'll be following up with all of the attendees with the guides that Mr. Flores is going to make available to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
very
Palante,
much.
for having us. My
Thank
team
you.
from
Thank you.
HRA and Office of External Affairs, thank you for joining me. Have a great one, everybody. We appreciate
Thank you,
you reaching out to
everyone.
us.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
Thank you,
Thanks. Have a
everyone.
good night.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Good night, everybody.
Good night now.
Bye.